Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is going to be a little different.
Yeah, it really is a shift in tone.
Usually, we take a stack of articles or a new book and we pull out the fun facts, the cocktail party trivia or those did you know moments.
Right, the lighter stuff.
Exactly. But today, the source material we have is, well, it's heavy. And I don't mean heavy like a dense textbook heavy. I mean heavy like it sits on your chest at 3 a.m. when you're staring at the ceiling fan and wondering if you've just messed everything up beyond repair.
It's definitely a more intense topic.
Yeah.
But I would argue, I really think it's one of the most necessary deep dives we've ever planned.
Yeah.
Because we are talking about a totally universal human experience.
We're talking about hitting the wall. That exact moment where the setbacks have piled up so high that you can't see over them anymore.
Yes, exactly.
You lose the job or the relationship ends or the health diagnosis comes back bad. And you just think, well, that's it. I'm done. The story ends right here.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And in our modern context, we usually treat that feeling, that crushing sense of it being over, as a mental health issue. Or maybe just a bad mood or severe burnout.
Right. We medicalize it or we try to therapy our way out of it.
Exactly. But the text we are analyzing today, which is called Hope Reclaimed, the Jurisprudence of Despair and Deliverance, frames it completely differently.
Yeah. That title alone, it stopped me in my tracks. The Jurisprudence of Despair. Jurisprudence is a legal term. I mean, it's about law and verdicts and crime and punishment. It feels really weird to apply that to an emotion.
It does sound harsh initially, doesn't it?
Like, is feeling sad a crime now?
Well, the author of this text is doing something really fascinating here. They're arguing that despair isn't just a passive thing that happens to you. It's not like catching a cold.
Okay.
They argue that despair is actually a verdict. It is a legal ruling that you as the individual pass on your own future. You are the judge, and you are essentially banging the gavel and saying, case closed. And the source material is essentially an appeal lawyer walking into the room and saying, objection. You do not have the authority to close this case.
I really like that image. So the mission for this deep dive for you listening right now is to basically reopen the case files on our own lives.
Exactly what we're aiming to do.
We're going to look at this text, which claims that giving up hope is actually one of the most dangerous things a human being can do, not just for their mood, but for their actual reality.
It is considered a crime against one's own potential. And in the theological framework of the text, a crime against the nature of reality itself.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty, because I think I know what despair is.
Yeah.
I think you listening know what despair is. It's crying in the shower. It's not getting out of bed.
That's the common understanding, yeah.
Right. But the source material spends a huge amount of time defining terms. It uses these highly specific Arabic words like yaz and qanut. And apparently, we've just been using the word despair all wrong.
We really have. We tend to use despair and depression and sadness and disappointment as synonyms. We just throw them all in a blender. But this text separates them with absolute surgical precision.
So let's break that down.
The first major distinction is yaz.
Yaz. Okay. How is this defined in the text?
Linguistically, yaz means the cutting off of hope. The root word implies a physical severance. Imagine a rope that connects you to a future expectation.
Okay. I'm picturing a rope.
Yaz is the act of taking a pair of scissors and deliberately snipping that rope.
That sounds incredibly active.
That is the crucial key point here. It is an active internal decision. It is the exact opposite of expectation. The text notes that yaz implies a definitive decision where you tell yourself this desired outcome will not happen, period.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate with you here for a second. Sometimes, isn't that just being realistic?
How do you mean?
Well, if I apply to be an astronaut and I'm 45 with bad knees and I say I'm not going to be an astronaut, am I despairing or am I just, looking at the data?
That is a fantastic question. And the text actually addresses this specific nuance. There is a massive difference between accepting a physical limitation and committing yaz.
Okay.
Yaz often carries a connotation of deciding that absolutely no good can come from a situation, or that a door is locked eternally. And here's where it gets really, really interesting. The source notes that yaz can happen before you even try.
Before you try.
Yes. You look at the application for the astronaut program or the job or the potential partner, and you cut the rope before you even step forward. You decide the outcome is no without ever testing reality.
Oh, wow.
That is yaz. It's a preemptive strike against your own chances.
That honestly hits home. Just thinking about the number of things I haven't done because I decided it probably won't work out anyway.
Exactly. It's a self-sabotage mechanism. And the text contrasts this specifically with another term, haiba.
Taiba. Okay, what is that?
Kaiba is what we would translate directly as disappointment.
Uh-huh.
But the structural difference between it and Yaz is huge. Kaiba only happens after you have hoped and tried and failed.
So I apply for the job, I do the grueling interview, I get the rejection letter, and I feel terrible.
That is Kaiba.
Correct. That is the completely natural human reaction to a missed expectation. The text doesn't penalize you for that at all. You tried. The outcome wasn't what you wanted. You are disappointed.
That makes sense.
But Yaz is the spiritual trap because it dictates reality before it happens. You can have Yaz without ever failing, simply because you were too afraid to even make the attempt.
So Kaiba is about the past. Something happened and it didn't work. Yaz is about the future, saying nothing will ever work.
Precisely. And then we have the big one, the real heavy hitter of the text, Colette.
Qanat. Yeah, the text seemed to treat this as the final boss level of despair.
It really is. If Yaz is the internal mental decision to cut the rope, then Colette is the physical state that follows that decision.
How does it translate?
It is often translated as despondency or intense despair. But the visual imagery used in the source is much more visceral than that. It describes it as stopping or refraining entirely from hope. Stopping, like a car breaking down on the highway.
Worse, actually. Like an engine completely seizing up because the oil has run totally dry.
Ouch.
Some scholars, cited in the text, argue that Qanat is the physical manifestation of Yaz. Because you have decided internally that there is no hope, that's the Yaz, your body literally stops moving toward the good.
So it's paralysis.
Complete paralysis. You refrain from action, you refrain from seeking mercy, you refrain from trying to fix the problem.
It's the paralysis. It's when you just lie on the floor. You know you should get up. You know you should wash the dishes or send the email or call your mom, but you physically feel like you can't.
Because why would you?
Yeah.
If the verdict in your head is that it's impossible, then any energy expenditure is just a waste. Qanat is the state of total biological and spiritual shutdown.
That is so descriptive.
And the text notes that this specific state is considered a trait of the astray and the disbelievers in religious texts.
Oof. Okay. We need to pause right there because this is where I think anyone listening might be feeling a little attacked.
I can see why.
Right. I mean, if someone is in that state, if they are paralyzed by clinical depression or severe grief, and then this text comes along and says, hey, you're acting like a disbeliever, isn't that just kicking someone when they're down? It feels incredibly judgmental.
I completely understand that reaction. It sounds exceptionally harsh to the modern ear, but we have to look closely at why the text classifies it this way.
Okay, explain that.
It's not trying to shame the person for feeling pain. The pain is valid. What it's trying to do is shape the person into realizing the massive implication of their state.
What implication exactly?
This brings us right into the verdict section of our outline. The source ranks despair of God's mercy and despair of release as a major sin, a kabira. It even cites the scholar Ibn Masud, who places it right after polytheism, shirk.
That is wild. I mean, polytheism is like the #1 do not do in this entire theology, and despair is ranked #2, worse than murder, worse than theft.
Logically, yes. And here's the deep dive insight that really explains the mechanics of why. Think about a physical sin like theft. When a person steals, why do they do it?
Well, because they want the money. They have a moment of weakness. It's greed.
Right, it's a temporary lapse in self-control or judgment. But does a thief necessarily deny that God exists? Or that God is powerful?
No, not usually.
No, they don't. They just ignore the rule for a moment because of temptation. But despair is different. Despair is an intellectual attack on the very nature of God himself.
How so?
If you look at your life and you say, there is absolutely no way out of this, you are effectively saying one of three things about the Creator. One, he is unable to help me, which completely denies his power.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Two, he doesn't know I'm stuck here in this mess, which denies his knowledge. Or three, he could help me and he knows I'm here, but he's just choosing not to because he's stingy, which denies his generosity.
Wow. But that way, it's not just saying I'm sad. It's saying God is incompetent.
Exactly. It is a profound form of arrogance. It masquerades as humility. We say, oh, I'm so broken I can't be fixed. But what you're really saying deep down is, my specific problem is somehow bigger than God's capacity to solve it.
You're putting yourself above the divine.
You're putting your limited, finite perception of the mess above the absolute, infinite reality of the solution.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It's saying that hope isn't just a fluffy, nice feeling to have on a motivational poster. It's a strict theological requirement. If you believe in an all-powerful God, you logically have to believe in the possibility of a solution.
Correct. The source quotes the Quran directly stating, "My mercy encompasses all things." If you look at your life and say, well, accept my problem, you are effectively calling the text a lie.
You're calling God a liar.
Yes, that is exactly why it is ranked so high on the list of major sins. It cuts the connection to the divine entirely.
The source mentions a very specific term here. Perdition, taluka.
Yes. Ibn Sirin, the famous historical dream interpreter, provides a brilliant commentary on the verse that says, "Do not cast yourselves into destruction."
I always thought that meant something literal, like don't jump off a cliff, don't drive your car without a seatbelt.
That's the surface-level physical interpretation, sure. But Ibn Sirin gives the deeper psychological interpretation. He says casting oneself into destruction is when a person sins or fails and then says, "I will never be forgiven."
Yeah, pass the verdict.
They despair. And because they despair, they stop doing good actions entirely. They completely let go of the wheel.
Yeah.
That internal giving up is the destruction. It's not the original mistake that destroys you. It's the subsequent belief that the mistake is fatal.
It's the resignation. You decide you're drowning, so you just stop swimming, and that is why you drown. Not because of the water, but because you stop moving your arm.
Precisely. The despair is what actually kills you.
Okay, so we've firmly established that this despair of God is bad. It's incredibly dangerous. It's a major sin. But then the text pulls this absolute jujitsu move on the reader.
The pivot.
Yes, the pivot. Just when I'm feeling really guilty about feeling bad, I found this twist in the source. Apparently there is a good kind of despair.
Yes. This is honestly my favorite part of the jurisprudence in this text. It shows such a deep, profound understanding of human psychology. There's a very specific context where despair is not only allowed, it is absolutely mandatory for your freedom.
And that concept is despair of what is in the hands of people.
The source quotes Umar bin al-Khattab, who is a towering historical figure in this tradition. He said, "Greed is poverty and despair is wealth."
Despair is wealth. You have to explain that to me, because usually despair feels like total emotional bankruptcy.
Think about your everyday relationships. Think about your career. When you are constantly hoping for something from other people, hoping your boss validates your hard work, hoping your friends invite you out, hoping for likes on social media, what is your internal state?
I'm anxious. I'm constantly waiting. I'm completely dependent on them.
You are poor. You are effectively a beggar standing at the door of other people's approval waiting for scraps. But the moment you apply yaz, that active cutting of the rope we talked about, to people,
What happens?
the moment you say, "I totally despair of ever getting validation from this person," what happens to you?
You stop caring. You just walk away.
You become instantly wealthy. You become completely self-sufficient. You get all your power back. Ibn al-Qayyim, another major scholar cited in the text, uses a very visceral, aggressive image here. He says you must slaughter greed with the knife of despair.
That is so metal. Slaughter greed with the knife of despair.
It's violent imagery for a very good reason. You have to take that sharp knife of Yaz and forcefully cut the cord of expectation from humans. He argues that spiritual sincerity, Iklas, and the love of human praise simply cannot coexist in the heart.
like oil and water.
Exactly like fire and water. If you want to be truly sincere with the divine, you have to forcefully despair of the human.
That is such a deeply useful reframing. So despair is really just a tool. If I point it at God, I destroy myself. But if I point it at people's expectations, I liberate myself.
Exactly. It's all about the vector. Where are you aiming the knife?
Okay, let's pivot back to the bad despair for a minute. Because the text doesn't just leave it at saying it's a sin and moving on. It describes the actual mechanism of how it destroys a person's life. We talked about the paralysis, the Qanat stopping. But there are other consequences that feel very, very modern.
Yes, the downward spiral. The corruption of the heart is a major one discussed. The text describes despair as a literal disease that ruins the sakina, or the core tranquility of the heart.
And it links this directly to the physical body, right?
It does. It says if the heart is corrupted, the body is corrupted.
Yeah.
And we know this now from modern medical science. Chronic stress hopelessness, the perpetual feeling of having no way out, it floods the physical body with cortisol.
It wrecks your health.
It destroys your immune system. It literally slowly kills you. These scholars were identifying a severe psychosomatic link centuries before modern medicine.
But the consequence that really scared me, the one that felt like a psychological horror movie plot, was the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Ah, yes. The concept, based on the famous Hadith Qudsi, where the divine speaks directly, saying, "I am as my servant thinks of me."
I am as my servant thinks of me. Let's unpack that. Because to a modern ear, that sounds like, I don't know, magic. Or quantum physics or something.
It's a profound theological mechanism.
Oh?
It means that God's interaction with you is actually fluid. It is actively shaped by your expectation. If you expect him to be merciful, you will find mercy.
Okay.
But if you fundamentally firmly believe God is out to get me or God has abandoned me completely,
Then you create that reality.
in a very real sense, yes, you are entrusted to that negative belief. The text argues that by despairing of relief, you effectively close the door to relief yourself. You slam it shut from your side of the room. It's not that the relief wasn't coming down the hallway. It's that you boarded up the windows and locked the door so it couldn't get in.
That is genuinely terrifying. It means my pessimism isn't just a bad mood, it's an active blockage of good things.
It is an active barrier. And it's not just about you as an individual either. The source talks at length about the social contagion of despair.
Right. The true faqih concept.
Exactly. Ali Ben Abi Talib gives a definition of a true scholar. A faqih that has absolutely nothing to do with memorizing books or rules. He says the true scholar is the one who does not make people despair of God's mercy.
That's a massive leadership lesson right there. If you're a leader or a parent or a teacher, if your brand of realism makes everyone around you want to give up, you aren't actually smart. You're just destructive.
Perfectly said. The source tells this historical story of the Israelites who stopped forbidding wrong in their society. They looked at the sinners in their community and they said, why bother preaching to people whom Allah will destroy anyway?
They completely wrote them off.
They despaired of the sinner's ability to ever change. They decided these people are trash. They are finished. And the source critiques this mentality heavily. That passive despair, that supreme arrogance of deciding who is savable and who isn't, is a massive...
Because it's easier to write someone off than to put in the work to help them. Despair is lazy.
Despair is incredibly lazy.
Yeah.
It conveniently excuses you from the hard, heavy lifting of hope.
So we know what it is. We know it's a verdict we pass on ourselves. We know it ruins our lives physically and spiritually, and it hurts our communities. The big question is, why do we do it? Why is it so incredibly easy to slide into that pit? The source identifies these root causes.
The very first one is simple: ignorance. The text argues that if you truly comprehended the attributes of the divine limitless power, limitless knowledge, limitless generosity to spare would be a logical impossibility.
Because the math wouldn't allow it.
Right. You only despair when you temporarily forget who you're actually dealing with.
But what about people who do know the theology? I mean, I know plenty of people who can quote all the books and they are still deeply depressed.
That brings us to the second root cause, the half-empty cup mentality. Or more specifically, an extreme attachment to the material world. I like to call this the calculator mindset.
The calculator mindset. I like that phrase.
We all live in a world of physical cause and effect. Input A leads to output B. If I have $0 in the bank, the calculator says I am completely broke. If the doctor looks at the scan and says incurable, the calculator says I am dead.
And that's really hard to argue with. I mean, facts are facts.
But the text argues that relying solely on material, tangible causes is a massive trap. It quotes the verse, if we give man a taste of mercy, he rejoices, but if evil touches him, he despairs.
The fluctuation.
Yes, this wild fluctuation, being euphoric when things go right and absolutely destroyed when things go wrong, shows that your anchor is entirely in the material world.
You're just riding the roller coaster of circumstances.
Exactly. The person who isn't attached to the material world doesn't crash when the material world crashes because their hope was never anchored there to begin with. They have a spiritual backup generator that the calculator simply can't see.
That makes a lot of sense. And then there's the third cause, haste, istijal.
Impatience. The source notes this is probably the primary psychological trigger for giving up. The thought process of, I prayed and I prayed and I worked, but nothing happened.
The timeline issue. We all want Amazon Prime next day delivery on our major life problems.
And the divine operates on a scale of eternity. The expert commentary in the text notes that so many people give up just moments before the relief arrives. It's that classic image of the miner digging for diamonds for years and quitting 1 inch before breaking through the wall.
That's tragic.
Haste makes us quit the race while we are literally still running it.
Okay. I feel sufficiently diagnosed at this point. I fully realize I have committed the crime of Yaz. I definitely have the symptoms of Qanat. I suffer from the calculator mindset. Now, how do I get out? The source calls this the jurisprudence of deliverance. What is the actual roadmap out of the dark?
The roadmap consists of 4 main remedies. And it's important to note they aren't just toxic positivity, think happy thoughts advice. They are deep structural changes to how you view reality.
Hit me with remedy number one.
Remedy 1 is the balance. The source uses the classic theological analogy of two wings. A bird cannot fly with only one wing. The believer must perfectly balance between fear and hope.
Okay, but when I'm in despair, I feel like I have way too much fear.
Exactly. If the fear wing dominates, you crash nose first into despair. You think, I'm doomed, my sins are too great, this problem is way too big. But, and this is equally important, if the hope wing dominates without any actual work,
Then you're just delusional. You sit on the couch saying everything will be fine while your house literally burns down around you.
that is called false security. Delusion. The remedy is the constant act of adjustment. If you feel yourself getting arrogant or lazy, you have to lean on the fear wing to correct your course. If you feel yourself sinking into the dark pit, you must forcefully lean on the hope wing. You have to actively pilot the bird. You can't just let it passively drift.
Okay. That makes sense conceptually. But let's say you listening are in the dark pit right now today. Balancing wings feels like a lot of intellectual effort. Is there a simpler mental switch to flip?
There is. This brings us to remedy 2, the power of maybe,
Maybe.
in Arabic la'ala. The source tells an incredible historical story of a prisoner named Ibn Wahab. He is locked in a dark dungeon. He is suffering immensely. He writes a letter to his brother on the outside, and the letter is just pouring out absolute qanat. I am finished. I am dying in here. There is no way out.
He's venting his despair.
His brother receives the letter, and he writes back. But he doesn't give him a theological lecture. He just sends him poetry centered entirely around one single word, la'ala.
Maybe.
Maybe relief is close. Maybe Allah will bring about a totally new situation.
It sounds so incredibly small. Just maybe.
But psychologically, it is explosive. Because despair deals strictly in absolutes. It will never change. It is always going to be this way.
Right.
Maybe breaks the absolute. It cracks the concrete door open just 1 millimeter. And the text says that upon reading this poem, the prisoner's entire mood shifted instantly from despair to optimism. He didn't know how he would get out, but he simply allowed for the possibility of change.
And did he get out?
The historical footnote confirms he was released shortly after.
I absolutely love that. You don't have to force yourself to believe it will be great. You just have to believe it might change. That's a significantly lower bar to clear when you're depressed.
Precisely. It completely de-escalates the definitive verdict of Yaz.
Remedy 3. And this is the one that involves the ant, right?
Yes, action as an antidote. The famous story of Al-Kisai.
Set the scene for us. Who is Al-Kisai?
He's a historical legend. He's one of the 7 canonical reciters of the Quran, a total master of Arabic grammar. But the story goes that when he first started studying, he was older. He was trying to learn these incredibly complex rules of grammar, and he just couldn't get it to stick. He felt stupid. He felt he was way too old to learn.
He hit the wall.
He hit the wall hard. He was totally ready to quit. He was going to commit Yaz. He's sitting there, head in his hands, probably feeling like a total failure in life. And he sees an ant.
Just a little random ant.
A tiny ant carrying a piece of food trying to climb up a vertical wall. The ant starts climbing. It gets halfway up the wall and falls.
Gravity wins.
Gravity wins. The ant goes all the way back down, picks up the crumb, starts climbing again, falls again, starts again, falls again. The story implies this went on for a very, very long time. Al-Kisai is just sitting there completely captivated, watching this tiny struggle.
I can easily imagine him projecting his own academic struggle onto the ant, just thinking, give up, little guy, the wall is too high.
But the ant does not give up. Eventually, after who knows how many dozen attempts, the ant finally makes it over the threshold. And Al-Kisai has this massive epiphany. He realizes something profound. The ant didn't have a better climbing strategy. It didn't pause to read a book on technique.
Right.
It just had raw persistence. It flat out refused to accept the no from gravity.
And that completely changed his life.
He famously said, "It is not befitting that this tiny ant is more persistent than me." He immediately went back to his studies. He refused to quit, and he eventually became the Imam of Kufa, the absolute master scholar of his era, all because he refused to stop moving his feet.
That connects perfectly to the other major case study in this section, the story of Jacob or Jacob.
Yes, if Al-Kisai is the minor leagues of hope, Jacob is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world.
Remind the listener of the context here. Jacob has lost his son, Joseph.
He hasn't just lost him recently. Joseph has been gone for years, decades even. Jacob has cried so much over the loss of his son that the Quran says his eyes turned white. He went physically blind from the sheer grief.
That is unimaginable pain.
His other sons are looking at him and telling him, "Dad, you have to stop this. You're literally going to kill yourself with this grief." Joseph is long gone.
Everyone around him has completely despaired.
Everyone. The logic says he is dead. The timeline says he is dead. The material calculator says zero chance. But Jacob says, I know from Allah what you do not know. And then he gives this incredible command. He tells his sons, go and sense for Joseph, and do not despair of Allah's spirit.
Go and sense.
Think deeply about that. He is blind. He is elderly. He is heartbroken. But he does not just sit in his tent and passively wait for magic to happen. He deploys his sons. He initiates an active search mission. He says, go look.
That is the operational advice right there. Hope is not passive. Hope is an action verb.
Exactly. Real hope has legs. If you are despairing of finding a job, hope isn't sitting on your couch wishing for a job to manifest. Hope is sending out the resume, even if you firmly think it won't work. Jacob sent his sons to look. Even when all logic said Joseph was dead, you have to take the physical step.
And the final remedy mentioned in the text is about understanding the very nature of relief itself.
This is a beautiful poetic analogy. The core adage and the source is relief comes at the exact moment of tightening.
Like the darkest hour is just before the dawn.
It's deeper and more mechanical than that. The source says, when the rings of the crisis tightened completely, it was finally released. Think about a physical knot in a rope. When is the knot at its absolute tightest?
Right before it snaps or gets untied.
Exactly. When is the physical pressure of childbirth the greatest? Right before the baby is actually born.
So the extreme pressure isn't a sign that the end is near. It's a sign that that change is near.
Yes. If you are feeling maximum pressure right now, if the walls are totally closing in on you, the source suggests that you shouldn't interpret that as I'm being crushed. You should interpret it as I am in the final transition. The tightening is the required precursor to the expansion.
That completely reframes the suffering. It gives the pain an actual purpose.
It turns the pain into a birth pang rather than a death rattle.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, we have to talk about the stories. The source includes these incredibly vivid historical and allegorical examples to make sure we really absorb the lesson. And my absolute favorite one, that honestly made me laugh out loud, was the man and the camel.
Ah, yes, the famous hadith of the man in the desert. This story is meant to illustrate just how desperately God wants you to come back to hope.
So paint the picture for us.
A man is traveling alone in a vast, barren, empty desert. He has his camel. On the camel is his food, his water, his survival supplies, literally everything keeping him alive in this wasteland. He stops to take a nap under a tree. He wakes up, and the camel is completely gone.
Absolute nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. He frantically searches everywhere. Over every dune, can't find it. He becomes incredibly thirsty, hungry, terrified. He finally realizes, this is it, I'm dead. He goes back to the tree, lies down in the shade, and waits for death to take him.
That is the exact moment of Yas. He has accepted his demise.
He's closed the file, he falls asleep waiting to die. But then he wakes up again, and the camel is standing right there. The rein is literally dangling in front of his face.
The relief must be explosive.
It's completely overwhelming. He grabs the rein, and he is so happy he wants to thank God. But his brain totally short-circuits from the joy. He looks up and he shouts, "Oh God, you are my servant and I am your Lord."
He got it completely backwards.
He committed the ultimate theological blasphemy. He called himself God and God the servant.
I just imagine the recording angels pausing with their pens in hand, like, wait, did he just say that?
But the prophet, peace be upon him, tells this story to make one very specific, beautiful point. God is more pleased with the repentance of his servant than this man is with finding his lost camel. And God absolutely does not punish the man for the verbal mistake because it came from a place of genuine, overwhelming joy.
I love that so much. It shows that God isn't some rigid bureaucrat looking for typos in your application. He's looking directly at the state of your heart.
Exactly. If God is that overwhelmingly happy to see you return to hope, why are you so incredibly afraid to return?
And then there's the other story, the darker one, the man who burned himself.
This one is specifically for the skeptics listening who think I've done way too much bad stuff in my life. I am totally beyond saving.
Because this guy went to extreme science fiction lengths to hide from God.
He really did. He was a man who had sinned heavily his entire life. On his deathbed, he gathered his family and told them, "When I die, I want you to burn my body until it is nothing but ash. Then crush the ash even finer. Then wait for a really windy day and scatter half of my ashes in the sea and half of them on the land."
He was literally trying to scatter his atoms across the earth so God couldn't put him back together.
He was trying to hack the resurrection. His thought process was, if I don't physically exist, I can't be put on trial and punished.
Flawless logic, except for the whole omnipotent God part.
Right, a minor oversight. So the story goes that God commanded the sea to gather what was in it and the land to gather what was in it, and the man was instantly reassembled standing before his creator. And God simply asked him, "Why did you do this?"
And this is the moment of truth. What does he say?
The man looks at God and says, "From fear of you, my Lord."
And what happens?
And God immediately forgave him.
Just like that.
Just like that. Even though his theology was a complete mess. I mean, he literally didn't believe God had the power to resurrect him. His heart was in a state of genuine awe. He wasn't acting out of arrogance. He was acting out of pure terror of the divine. And that fear, that basic acknowledgement of God's supreme status, was enough to trigger the mercy.
That is incredibly comforting. It means you don't have to be a perfect person. You don't even have to have your theology 100% flawlessly correct. You just have to acknowledge the relationship exists.
Yes. Mercy is constantly actively looking for an excuse to save you. Despair is literally the only thing that blocks it.
The source also zooms out from the individual level to look at history, just to remind us that this mechanism isn't just about personal problems.
It mentions the historical fact of the Crusaders holding Jerusalem for 90 solid years. Imagine living in year 89 of that occupation. You would absolutely think this is the permanent new reality. It will never ever change. But of course it did.
90 years is a lifetime.
It also mentions the devastating Mongol invasion, the Tatars who completely wiped out Baghdad and the libraries. It looked like the literal apocalypse, the absolute end of the Muslim world. But exactly 41 years later, the entire situation reversed.
History is so incredibly long.
And despair is incredibly short-sighted. That is the macro lesson here. Despair looks strictly at the frozen frame, but hope watches the entire movie.
Despair looks at the frame, hope looks at the movie. I am absolutely stealing that line.
Please do. It's a good one.
So bringing it all home for the listener, we've looked at the linguistics, the active cutting of the rope of expectation. We've looked at the intense theology, the absolute arrogance of closing the door on an all-powerful God. We've looked at the psychology, the balancing of the wings of fear and hope. What is the final word from the text?
The source leaves us with two incredibly beautiful grounding images. First, it says gold is found in the belly of mountains, not lying on the side of the road.
Meaning what exactly in this context?
Meaning that the truly valuable state hope deliverance spiritual relief requires intense digging. It requires the relentless struggle of that tiny ant. If hope was easy to maintain, it wouldn't be gold, it would just be cheap dirt. So if you are struggling to maintain hope right now, that's just the sound of your pickaxe hitting the hard rock. Keep digging.
Don't drop the pickaxe. And what was the second image?
The second is a desert proverb. If the difficult entered a lizard hole, ease would enter upon it.
A lizard hole. That sounds kind of funny, actually.
It does, but it perfectly captures the absolute inevitability of relief. In the deep desert, a lizard hole is incredibly tight, dark, winding, and deep. But the saying implies that relief is like a relentless tracker. No matter where your difficulty hides, no matter how deep the hole you are in relief, we'll track it down and enter upon it. You simply cannot escape the coming relief any more than you can escape the current difficulty.
I want to leave you listening with one final provocative thought from the source material that really, it just sat with me for days after reading it. It's about the percentages of the universe.
Ah yes, the famous tradition of the 99 parts.
The text mentions a tradition that says God divided mercy into exactly 100 parts. He kept 99 parts with himself and sent down only one single part to the earth.
Just one part. And the mind-blowing thing is that from that one single part comes literally every act of kindness you have ever seen or experienced. A mother nursing her child, an animal tending to its young, a friend helping a friend out of a jam, the warm feeling of love, the feeling of absolute safety, the profound beauty of a sunset. All of that compassion and the entire history of the human race combined is just that 1%.
So the question I have for myself and the question I have for you listening is this. If everything we know about love and safety and beauty is just 1%, why would we ever logically choose to despair regarding the 99% that is still waiting for us?
That really is the ultimate question, isn't it? The math simply does not support despair.
Something for you to mull over today. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Don't cut the rope. Keep looking for the camel. And we'll see you next time.